So behind Uber, the app, which is used by hundreds of millions of people globally, there's an engineering organization that has been building one of the most mature internal AI platforms in the industry by making deliberate and compounding infrastructure bets over a long period of time. Today, Uber's background agent platform called Minion is responsible for generating over 11% of all merged PRs across of Uber. They also have a large scale migration management platform called Shepard, which runs migrations across hundreds of millions of lines of code. They have custom AI tools for chest generation, code review, and more, all built internally and compounding on top of each other. So, my guest today is Nikhil, a software engineer on Uber's developer platform team. Nikhil has been at Uber since 2016. He came in as an intern, loved it, and then just never left. So, he's been there for a long time. And over that time, he's been one of the leading engineering voices behind Uber's agentic shift. An early adopter of Claude Code inside of Uber, and he's been a key force in building the primitives that underpin everything that you're about to hear within Uber's development platform. So, Nikhil, welcome and thank you so much for being here.
Very flattering. Thanks for having me, Lou.
When it comes to building AI and agent first, sort of AI first developer platform, you already had an existing developer platform, CI infrastructure, cloud compute, development environments, sort of compound investments that you've made over those years. What are those bets that you've placed that have kind of taken you to where you are today?
We were already getting to a point at Uber where a engineer was not necessarily a specialist. That is, they were not only building Android code. They actually happened to build Android, iOS, they happen to build the back end, they happen to build sometimes the front end. They actually happen to be a fully product focused engineer. So if you want to wear multiple hats, you need to be able to switch between environments. And environment isolation wasn't a soft problem. So I actually built a rudimentary container for local development for Android engineers. And that rudimentary container, within like a year, evolved into a prototype called DevPod. Instead of actually having this environment where you had to set up and it wasn't reproducible, now you'd have this box and you'd be able to just put everything in the remote machine and plan for a future where your engineers are not really interfacing with the local tooling if they don't want to. In other words, if I don't want to have Android tooling on my machine, I can use a DevPod. If I want to build Go code, I can use a DevPod.
Yeah, exactly. So we're kind of, I guess, going from this world before, right, onboarding humans, and now this also translates over to agents, and how do we onboard those? And I think one question that's on a lot of people's mind is what happens if we give agents their own computers and allow them to do stuff, and can we run them for longer periods of time? Can we get them to do more significant work? But that in itself is a new working model that we haven't seen before. So comes with it challenges around security, challenges around infrastructure, and also wrangling large language models to kind of do this longer horizon work. I know that's something that Uber has also started to experiment with. And you do have an internal platform called Minion. It'd be great if you could take us through and sort of talk us, the inception of Minions, like where that's at today. And
The key distinction, I think, for Minion that came about was the idea of that certain tasks are toil tasks. You are working on a product feature or something like that. Somewhere in the middle, you get a ticket. The ticket says, fix this massive vulnerability. You quickly reshuffle your work. You say, okay, I need to make this fix, but to make this fix, I have to make the fix, I have to test the fix, I have to make sure it's working in production. And I'm the only person who can look at it because I own the fix. But the actual fix is minor. It's actually the validation loop that takes a long time, and that's what I'm required for. So what do? I have to reset my schedule and go and make the fix myself. Now, actually, at Uber, as the stack grew, this kind of work became common work, common engineering work. So, what is Minions about? We made a bunch of trade offs. There are toil tasks as a result of a lot of these trade offs that people have to deal with. Can we give them a way to win back time by stack ranking their work in a way where they can background some of the toil, right? So that when they get to the validation, 50% to 70% of the work required has been completed by a backgrounded agent. So first is the bet on a specific tool that can do a specific task. Secondly, is that can do that task well. So a lot of the time people want to say, write me a big feature from an agent. We cannot measure, I cannot score on that. I can score you on whether you can do the basics. So I tell you to change a line of code. If you can figure out whether you need to run tests also as an agent, right? You need to can figure out, oh, I have a tree of dependencies that may be affected by the change I'm about to make. That I don't have to explicitly tell you. This is the bet. The bet is that toil work that seems simple, but actually has wide-ranging scale for a company like Uber. Can we automate the toil? And so I wrote like a little doc, and because of that, we founded like a platform where we put this agent and a number of these other specialist agents into our CI infrastructure. And we accept prompts in order to do work. It goes through our CI checks, and all our tests run, and quality checks, diff description, as much metadata as we need. But the end goal is to actually remove the toil from the engineer. And one key point I want to make: the engineer is a sensitive creature. That is, don't promise an engineer the world when you give them a platform. Give them a valuable use case, because you have to go to where the pain lives. If I can prove to an engineer that the core value proposition of taking certain painful toil tasks away from you is beneficial, they will naturally understand that AI is not here necessarily to take away all of the work, just the parts of the work that are tedious. They require rigor and tedium to execute.
When it comes to those toil and those use cases, how are you, thinking about the sort of use case identification and rollout across Uber?
Yeah, this is a big challenge, I will admit, mainly because you have the industry and the industry's documentation of the various product use cases for agentic AI, right? And then you have the internal conflict, which is not everything will apply, but a lot of it can in different ways. The common feedback we get actually is that I don't know what to choose. I don't even want to choose. And I think for us, that's very big signal, right? If it comes down to us to make a choice, then we go quite strictly with like our developer satisfaction and data. And satisfaction data is like onboarding is tough. Toil work is taking away a lot of my time. I barely get any time to do deep work, right? You have very clear signal that you kind of need to invest. Oh, okay, code reviews are taking a lot of time. But we can't be like Apple. We can't just put out a tool and say, you use it this way. Actually, they're going to tell us, no, no, we use it this way. You need to listen to what I'm saying. And there's a little bit of a negotiation there too. We can now take bigger swings that say, oh, reviews are a bottleneck. Let's try to make high quality agentic reviews. Is toil work like cleaning up feature flags or cleaning up things or doing small changes a bottleneck? Let's give you that ability to get you out of that zone and then measure directly. Is this actually helping you? I think that's what most organizations working in this space are really looking for, right? They're looking for people with ingenuity to act on boring feedback. You're going to get every quarter, you're going to find out documentation is a pain point. That toil is a pain point. The feeling of productivity is as important as actual productivity. These two go hand in hand when you actually want to have a productive set of engineers or a productive workforce, right?
Uber has or has been investing in also in a platform called Shepard. What does it look like if we can also apply agents at scale across our organization for something like migrations or sort of upgrades and things like that? Anyone who's worked with Java or some of these other tools know that they need upgrading all the time. So then you're going to have to do this across a number of different services, some of which may not necessarily be actively developed upon. And it seems like Shepard is then exploring and experimenting with that type of like large scale change.
So the idea behind Shepard is to take real work that needs to get done, but put it in the context of an evergreen engineering. It's evergreen engineering, right? Like, that's how I would put it, right? You don't want to be chasing your tail, sort of, when you're doing this work. The work is a fact of engineering. You have to be on the cutting edge regardless. But what we found, I think even with things like Shepard, is if we can give people the platform to be able to disseminate changes and give them the tools to be able to have a mental model of a large change, they can operate on that primitive. And that's a primitive. At the end of the day, a large scale change is a primitive that we support now with Shepard.
Minion is sort of one form of primitive that can push toil off into the background. Then you have Shepard, which is more for these large scale, mass changes. And then Shepard is effectively going to manage the sort of merge conflicts and keeping those PRs up to date and give you a sort of centralized view then for those mass changes across the organization.
Right, exactly. And I think the angle with Shepard ultimately is we need to keep evergreen code. We want to keep our code healthy, and we want to give people the primitive to be able to do that. And less like Minion, which is targeting some level of toil in one way, Shepard is targeting some of this work in a different way.
Organizations where the engineers, I guess, identify a little bit more with the idea of being a builder, or they're a little bit more outcome oriented,
Yeah.
seems to be where the organizations are moving faster towards agentic or AI driven development.
Yeah.
Is the fabric of Uber, kind of that builder oriented culture? And would you say is that a factor in kind of what drives your speed of adoption of AI? Is that
Mandating the use of AI didn't really get adoption where it needed to be. People had to realize for themselves. It had to reach a point of capability before people adopted it. What does that tell you about the culture of engineers in general? They're all builders. In fact, the reason why we even have 90% of the primitives beyond before AI that I'm talking about is because the builders need to keep building. They need to move fast. For example, DevPods is just a function of being able to parallelize manually, essentially, right? Like there are dev containers. These remote dev environments, it's just parallelism without agents, right? We already reached that point where our builders were demanding more easy ways to build. So, what does that mean for platform? It means for on the platform side, we have to also think about whether we can wear some of those hats for them and consider what a builder would scrutinize as a waste of time sometimes, right? Is how do I make them stick? Is kind of, and the culture of making it stick comes from being able to give people the ability to fail in a safe way. If I give you the tool and I tell you use this or else, that's not going to work. If I tell you I give you the tool and that tool says I can do X, Y, and Z, and then you actually put it in production and it can do a quarter of X, a tenth of Y, and a 50th of Z, I will fail there as well. What I need is the engineer to be able to see that I know the pain they see. That's what gets a builder really hungry, when they know that they can take the tool and they can mold it to their outcome. In other words, maybe for us agents at our company, for us agents are the way to go because our engineers are builders who need to be able to finally configure and control what they do, and not that we are necessarily forcing them to work with an expectation that these things do things that maybe they're not capable of.
any sort of parting wisdom or final thoughts that you have that you'd like to share?
It's not actually that late, and in fact most people still don't have it figured out. And there's room here, there's runway here to figure this out, because the primitives have always been the same. Can I move my engineers faster? Can I take away the pain that they see on a daily basis, so that they can focus on building high quality features? That mission as a platform is the same 10 years ago and it's the same today. The only difference is the means with which you go about solving your problem. All investments may or may not pay off. And of course, it's a sense of prioritization. That doesn't mean the primitives of high quality software delivery and rapid iteration. These things are important to actually most, I would say, that's my personal opinion. Most tech companies are going to want rapid iteration. So you want to have some of these fundamental primitives and make sure your engineers have a space to fail. Because if they fail and it's expensive for you, that ends up looking kind of tough for most people because it erodes trust, right? So you want to build a platform that lets people have the space to fail and protect people from toil and focus on the same things that they're always trying to do, which is build high quality products and features for the business.
Amazing. Nikhil, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Lou.